Okay, you should be seeing my first slide for Lougheed House Re-Imagined. So I have been working on Lougheed House Re-Imagined, the project, for a few years now, and so I'm here to give you just a brief overview of the project. So we'll start today with a bit about Lougheed House for those that are unfamiliar. Then we'll talk about the project. We'll go through what we've done so far, what the next steps are, and most importantly, how you can be involved. Lougheed House is a national and provincial historic site. The house was built in 1891 by Sir James and Lady Isabella Lougheed. Neither James nor Isabella were born in Calgary, but both arrived in the early 1880s, married in 1884, the year Calgary was incorporated as a town. They were prominent citizens in early Calgary, James being a real estate developer, lawyer, and eventually a senator, and Isabella being a community builder, supporter of the arts, and great hostess. They raised 6 children in the house and lived there for the rest of their lives, over 4 decades. Unfortunately, during the Great Depression, the Lougheed family lost the home due to non-payment of taxes, and the house became property of the city. Since then, the house has had many different purposes. It served as a training center for young women during the Depression, a barracks for the Canadian Women's Army Corps during the Second World War, a blood donor clinic and the headquarters for the Red Cross, and eventually, in 2005, a museum and public heritage center. We like to think that the house survived through adaptive reuse. As many other historic houses and sites in Calgary were being demolished, Lougheed House survived, in part because it was always useful to the community. And so, in the spirit of remaining relevant and useful to the community, we are launching Lougheed House Re-Imagined. In the last 3 years, Lougheed House has undergone a radical transformation of how we develop exhibits and programming to become more focused on the arts as a pathway to understanding, to be more community-oriented, and to tell more diverse stories. This transformation includes working with diverse communities to facilitate the telling of community-based stories through a process of co-creation. We are doing this because we believe that history belongs to everyone, not just those in positions of institutional authority. The process of co-creation is one of the essential pieces because it also represents a new way of working for Lougheed House, one that involves the community directly in content creation and exhibit development. We recently undertook a community engagement project, which involved interviews and engagement with our stakeholders, community partners, and general public. Some of you may have been involved in that process, and if you weren't, we hope you'll take the opportunity now to tell us what you think. Through some of that feedback, we learned that Lougheed House at times has presented a hegemonic view of history, focused primarily on a colonial narrative. Members of Indigenous and racialized communities, the queer and feminist communities, have indicated that they have not always felt welcome at Lougheed House because the dominant narrative presented is not representative of their experience. Simply stated, they have not always seen themselves reflected in the house. In response, Lougheed House has been partnering with community members to develop programming and exhibits that are inclusive of our diverse community and that represent alternative and parallel histories of the house. So what you see on your screen right now is our current exhibit. That's Lady Lougheed's bedroom and bathroom. And to give you an idea of some of the new projects that we're working on, click through to the next slide. So maybe you've seen some of these projects, temporary exhibits that we've worked on, like 9 Lives, represented on the right, Outliers, and Exploring Métis Identity, represented on the photo on the left. Lougheed House Re-Imagined is a continuation of this way of working that will result in the redevelopment of our permanent exhibits. When we talk about the permanent exhibits, we mean the furniture, artifacts, displays, and interpretive signage that is on view permanently in the house. That's what you saw in the previous slide. The majority of this content is located on the 2nd floor, although there is signage throughout the house. We also plan to redevelop the audio guide and our interpretive tours. So we want Lougheed House Re-Imagined to be a complete overhaul of the space. So why are we doing this? To understand why we're moving in this direction, it's helpful to understand the work that we've already done. And I've alluded to some of it already. The process started in 2016 when we hired 2 consultants to do a visitor experience assessment of the house. They produced a report that included final recommendations and an implementation action plan. The recommendations were exhaustive. They covered everything from storage solutions to exhibit planning. In terms of interpretation, the report included 2 major recommendations based on their research, interviews with staff, and engagement with visitors. One of the recommendations was that the interpretive experience should be broadened to include more of the house's story. The second was that we needed to revise and modernize interpretive signage and the audio guide. These are 2 things we'll be doing with Lougheed House Re-Imagined. So with this information in hand, we've started with the first suggestion, broadening the experience to include more of the house's story. We saw some of that in projects like 9 Lives, Outliers, and Métis Identity. The original permanent exhibits at the house focus on the early history of the house and the Lougheed family story. We want to expand this story, and so we've taken the view that the house can be seen as a witness to history, to nearly 130 years of history. Not just the history inside its walls, but the history in the park and in the neighborhood and in the broader city. One of the first projects we undertook after the visitor experience assessment was the alternative community tours, also called alternatives. For this project, we invited 4 community members, or in one case, a small group, into the house to develop their own interpretive tour of the house that they would present to the public. We wanted them to connect their own community histories to the history of the house and to give them a sense of ownership and connection with the house. The people we chose were a diverse group. We had a feminist artist, a new immigrant, a person experiencing homelessness, and a group of local school children. Researching, developing, and delivering the tours was a meaningful way for these new interpreters and visitors to connect their own personal stories to the house. Following the success of that project, we knew that if we wanted to successfully invite community in to help us interpret Lougheed House, we would need a plan. So we worked with a consultant to create a community engagement framework. The framework acts as a tool, kind of like an engagement how-to, that anyone should be able to pick up and implement on a project. It's designed in such a way that it can be scaled to the size of each project it is used for, making it adaptable to any program or exhibit that we might want to pursue. The framework is based on public engagement best practices, and it's with the help of this tool that we're doing this current work. At the same time as we were developing the framework, we were also building partnerships with community to help us come up with an initial idea for the exhibit. Through intensive community consultation, brainstorming sessions with local historians and knowledge keepers, and our own research, we came up with a theme for the new permanent exhibit, Calgary's Surprising Stories. A little bit about the theme. Lougheed House is aspiring to be a place where all visitors can have an experience that connects them to the city of Calgary and to their own identity as a citizen of or visitor to our city. We're striving to be a place where the stories of people who made this place are the focus for a surprising look at Calgary's story. It's the personal stories that we remember. Hearing about the lived experience of those who have gone before can help bring history to life. We know a lot of these stories well. The Lougheed House's history is rich with them. The Lougheed family, the Canadian Women's Army Corps, and the Red Cross all share their history with this unique site. Beyond that, we know the significant events of the history of Calgary that have contributed to its development. The Stampede, the '88 Olympics, the flood of 2013, the building of the Calgary Tower. These are examples of the things that we think of when we think of Calgary history. But we know that the history of Calgary goes much deeper. It includes the unique stories of thousands of people who have come before from all walks of life. These are the stories that have yet to become a concrete part of Calgary's historic record. And so this is where we are today. We are in the engagement, testing, and feedback stage. We have a theme. We've collected some of these surprising stories, which you'll see in the coming weeks on our blog, but we're looking for more stories. We know that it is the community that holds these stories, and we are inviting the community in to share them with us. So what's next? After we collect the stories, we plan to develop an exhibit and interpretive plan. After that, we'll design an exhibit, again, with direct input from the community, and then we'll build it. Our hope is that the new permanent exhibit will open sometime in 2022. But of course, as anything working in community, timelines are flexible and fluid. We need to be responsive to the community, and so our timelines reflect that as well. So here's the most important part, and hopefully why you're here tonight: how you can get involved. There's many ways to get involved. You can simply stay informed, join our newsletter, follow us on social media, read our blog. You could consult with us, give me a call to tell me about your ideas, or send me an email. Perhaps one of the easiest ways to participate right now is online through our digital engagement page. We're using a platform called Civil Space, which is a digital engagement platform that will ask you some questions, solicit your feedback, and create a space where you can tell us your stories. We've designed a survey-style engagement that takes about 15 minutes to complete, where you can learn more about some of Calgary's surprising history and tell us your own story if you want. You can also sign up on Civil Space just to tell us a story if you don't necessarily want to learn more about the project, but you just know you have a story about Calgary you want to share, and that's a really quick engagement. You can also sign up to be a co-production volunteer on Civil Space. So we're not only looking for stories, we're looking for people to review our current exhibits, attend brainstorming sessions, and of course add any stories that they might have to the exhibit. You can sign up for those opportunities through Civil Space. Finally, we want you to collaborate with us. If you or your community has an important story to tell, let us know. We think it's really important for the community to be able to tell their own story, so we want to empower people to shape the narrative at the museum. We really want you to get involved. Okay, thank you so much for sticking with me. Very grateful that you're here, and I would really welcome your participation in this project in any way. So here's how you can get in touch. My email's on the slide here, and there's a general phone number for the house as well. I would really love to hear from you if you have anything to share.